So my name is Pete Hanna. I work for Object First. For those of you that don't know Object First, we provide secure storage solutions for Veeam environments. But what I want to talk to you today is about Zero Trust and whether Zero Trust is good, but whether it is actually good enough. And so I just want to talk you through some of the research that we see that's out there, and some of it comes from a company called ESG, which is Executive Strategy Group. Some of it comes from Veeam surveys that they do on an annual basis with their customers and across the wider scope. And some of it is research that we've done ourselves as well. And so when we talk about things like ransomware, and some of these statistics are quite frightening, really, to be honest. 66% of organizations say or admit that they've suffered from a ransomware attack. But actually, when you then dig a little bit deeper, organizations suffer multiple levels of ransomware attack. And the thing that we see much more regularly now is that ransomware actually targets the backup in 96% of cases. So actually, when you have that, you cripple that ability for an organization to recover when you do that. When an organization does suffer a ransomware attack, more than 50% of those organizations take longer than a whole business week to recover. And actually, some of them take significantly longer, 21 plus business days to recover the data as well. But I think the even more scary statistic is the amount of data that organizations can recover after a ransomware attack. So actually, there's 3/4 of organizations cannot recover their whole data. And even round here, a significant proportion of organizations can't recover their data after a ransomware attack. And we see that on a regular basis. We see that with retail, we see it with manufacturing, we see it with transport, and when companies can't pay ransomware costs, they go bust, even when they have cyber insurance. And all of this means that, as our last speaker was talking about, the stress and the strain on people in an organization is actually really significant. So across these surveys, 84% of people feel stressed that they don't have the right skills or they don't have the ability to cope with a ransomware attack. 78% feel responsible or held responsible for when a ransomware attack happens. And then the really concerning figure as well, almost 60% of IT staff in organizations are actively looking or considering looking for a new job. And one of the top 3 reasons why is because the organization has suffered a ransomware attack and there's such additional stress on that organization. And here, the other reason that they cite is that tech and tools are too complex. There's too much pressure on the individual to learn and understand and manage all the tools that they have within the organization as well. So there's a real requirement for simplicity. But as we talk about things like Zero Trust, it becomes more and more complex. And here's another. So 70% of organizations feel confident that they know what to do when a ransomware attack happens, except after they suffer from a ransomware attack. Then that confidence drops significantly. But even here, that's less than 50% of organizations that feel prepared they can deal with a ransomware attack. So we know that organizations can't deal with ransomware attacks. We know that there's a stress and strain on their staff. We know that ransomware targets backups. And we know that there's a real requirement for organizations to be prepared, because ransomware attacks aren't a case of if, I believe they're a case of when. Everybody who backs up their data is at high risk. It's a huge disruption to business, but also a massive stress and strain on staff, and staff feel ill-informed and ill-prepared to deal with that as well. So how do we deal with this? We live in that environment, so how do we deal with it? Well, Zero Trust is great, but actually data resilience is what you need to understand and what you need to focus on. Because in a zero trust environment, and I'm hoping that everybody understands zero trust. Don't put your hand up. There'll be a bunch of people surrounding you like hordes because there's lots of zero trust people in this room. In a zero trust principle, or zero trust principles, we assume there's a breach. We assume the bad guys are already in the network. In that case, what you have to do is segment. You have to segment the various functions in the organization to minimize the attack surface and minimize the blast radius. You have to verify explicitly using multi-factor authentication, identity and access management, and use least privileged access. So just in time and just enough access for people. These principles have been around for 15 years. You might know them as Zero Trust Network Access, XDR, SASE. The principles are there, and we all know that. However, this piece here, if you assume the bad guys are in, then what does that mean? It means that you have to think about recovery because the bad guys are already there. The bad actors are already thinking about how can we exploit this? How can we access this? So even though you have explicit verification, even though you have least privileged access, you then have to think about how you segment your data. So when you think about backup software or that backup infrastructure environment, that backup infrastructure environment has to separate. You have to separate the software from the infrastructure environment. We talk about multiple resilience zones, and if you were here and listening to Veeam earlier on, they would have talked about 32110, three copies of your data on two different types of media, one copy off-site, one immutable copy, and 0 errors in your testing as well. And that immutable backup storage, that last bunker of invincibility in your organization is absolutely critical to enable you to recover. So what does that really look like in this type of environment? I have a feeling my slides are out of order here. So we have the production environment, and we know that that attack surface is huge, and we know that we have to segment. We have the backup server environment, and we know that if there's a breach here, there's a high likelihood that there's a breach here. So what do you do then? Is you then have to reduce the attack surface and minimize the attack surface to enable you to do that. And this is all part of the 32110. And I'm going to skip ahead a couple of slides, if that's all right, because I realize that this has all gone out of order. Okay, that's fine. I'll go with it. So effectively what you're doing is you assume there's a breach, you assume the bad guys are in, you have to segment your backup software from your backup infrastructure environment, which means that this gives you the ability to recover much more quickly. And when you store it in an immutable format, then that gives you the ability then to start thinking about how you can recover because that data doesn't change. And when we talk about immutability, immutability means nothing if it can be compromised. So if you have an immutable service, but it can be accessed by a network administrator, or it can be accessed by the vendor, or you have any kind of access to destructive actions, whether they are intentional or accidental, you don't have immutability. And that's absolutely critical so that you cannot modify or delete the data that's stored there. So this immutability starts to become your last line of defense and your ability to then set out your recovery strategy and start to rebuild on that resilience. So how do you achieve that? So we know about S3 object storage. We know that it exists in the cloud with AWS and Azure and G-Cloud and everything else. But if we have it and we build it into an appliance and you have that S3 immutability on site, then what that gives you is the ability to recover and the assurance that the data that you're recovering hasn't been compromised, which means that when you look at things like landing zones and unencrypting and de-encrypting data to put it into some form of storage, that gives you, again, a vulnerability in your environment. So 0 time to immutability. So in a Veeam environment, your data is encrypted from the moment it leaves the VBR server to your storage server. That means there's end-to-end encryption, and you have absolutely security from that perspective as well. So you can ensure whatever happens, ransomware, insider threats, everything else, you still have the ability to recover. So then when we put that into an object-first environment, and with Veeam, you have Veeam as the backup software, object-first, on-premise as the device that allows you to store your data and recover from it. You're still working on these zero trust principles and assuming that there's a breach, but it actually gives you the ability to segment and recover really, really quickly. And you can do this on-premise, you can do it in a capacity tier, and we would never ever say don't use cloud, because cloud is great for capacity and long-term storage and retention. But if anybody has ever done a recovery test from the cloud, we have customers that take weeks to recover that data from the cloud because it throttles that data back in. When you think about the speed of recovery that you need from that survey, then that gives you the ability then on-premise to recover quickly as well. So we've built an appliance that's secure, that's simple, that's powerful. So secure, we use S3. It's simple. You can literally take it out of the box, stack it, connect it up, and run backups from a Veeam administrator. So you don't need technical knowledge. You don't need to build DIY solutions. And you don't need to be able to configure anything at all. You can literally start to recover and deploy from that point. And it's powerful. Because it's network connected, it means that you don't have any throttling issues. You're network connected, so it gives you the ability to recover from there as well. So I had another slide. Seems to have disappeared. So come talk to me on the booth, and the rest of the team here as well. And we can talk to you about the range of products. So we can scale from 17 terabytes all the way up to 7 petabytes as well. And then that gives you the ability to, we also have a consumption offering, which means that you can pay as you grow as well. And that's me. Thank you very much.